Welcome to SandCity Sports. I am your host, the Cape Cod Kid, artist formerly known as Andre King, and we are back again to bring you all the sports and current events news stories that you need to know. A quick shout out to start to Dave and all the good people here at the Cape Cod Media Center for helping us to get this show up and running off the ground into the air. Going to be a little bit shorter this segment, but happy to be here and get right into it. So, for starters, folks, the Celtics are talking about there is some stealth, there is some subtle action going on centered around bringing Kemba Walker to Boston. Let me go on the record first, foremost, beginning, end, absolutely, and just say this is ridiculous. The Celtics should not be pursuing Kemba Walker. In fact, the Celtics should not be doing any of this stargazing, any of this Superman hunting, going out and looking for, these transcendent players who, frankly, are not leaning towards, are not thinking about, probably will not end up signing with Boston. The Celtics should focus on improving the roster that they have and building from within. So back to Kemba Walker. I believe the New York Times has reported that the Mavericks and the Celtics are now actively pursuing this Charlotte free agent. And as free agency approaches, we have less than a week, or it might be exactly a week before July 1st, and free agents can sign with whatever team they choose. We're seeing a lot of these stories, and I don't know, maybe teams want to stay current, maybe they want to stay relevant, maybe it's just agents getting this information out there to provide them and their clients with leverage. But in real time and in terms of what's actually going to make teams better, the idea of Kemba Walker coming to Boston, even though he's an all-star, even though he was third team All-NBA this year, which means that, by the way, he's eligible for a max extension. Even though he is, by most reports, a much better teammate than one Mr. Kyrie Irving, who has both feet out the door, Kemba Walker will not make the Jason Tatums of the world better. He's not going to make the Jaylen Browns of the world better, the Gordon Hayward. He's not. You already have enough scoring at present on the Boston Celtics roster. And for those reasons, I don't think it's reasonable. I don't think it's helpful. I don't think it's going to be productive when the 2019-2020 season starts if Kemba Walker is your starting point guard or off guard. Called in at WEEI today, and I made this point, which I borrowed from one Mr. Hank O'Brien, very talented ball player out of Sandwich. But after last week's game over at CCA, the Academy, good men's league that we have here on the Cape, some of the fellas were just talking, and Hank was like, something, who the Celtics need to go after? Ricky Rubio. Thought it was an outstanding idea then, a couple of days ago. After thinking on it for a few more days, I think it's an even better idea. Ricky Rubio did yeoman's work the last 2 years for the Utah Jazz. They were a 4 or 5 seed both years, okay? 2 years ago, he unfortunately got hurt in their second-round battle against the Houston Rockets, where I believe they won 2 games against a team that went on to take a 3-2 lead against the Golden State Warriors, and many people think was one hamstring away from competing for and probably winning an NBA championship. But this year, the Rockets again broke through to the playoffs, matched up against Houston in the first round. Series only won 5 games. It was a gentleman's sweep. But this, to be a 4 or 5 seed in the Western Conference means that you would basically be a 1, 2, or 3 seed in the Eastern Conference. And for the Utah Jazz, a team that lost their best player in Gordon Hayward 2 years ago, replaced him with nobody, and remain in contention, that speaks to the character and the quality of both their players and their management. And so they decided to bring in Mike Conley, who is a good player. He's also a very highly paid player. But in doing that, they had to give up some key pieces Jay Crowder and Kyle Korver, along with a draft pick. And now they look, they will not be able to re-sign Ricky Rubio, who, by the way, that $32 million that is now committed to Mike Conley, Ricky Rubio was making less than half of that, at I believe $15 million. So he's out there on the free agent market. These are the type of players, and this is the type of player particularly that the Celtics should be targeting, who can come in, that will provide leadership. He's a pass-first guy who will put your lead players, your core players, the Tatums, the Jaylen Browns and the Haywards, in positions to be successful. He's been a good teammate everywhere that he's been, and will establish a winning culture that, at the end of the day, again, all this star chasing and talk about, and you do have some transcendent players that are out there. Kevin Durant, even though he's going to be out next year, first ballot Hall of Famer. We're talking top 15, top 20, top 25 all time. Anthony Davis decided to go ahead and play with the Lakers. Klay Thompson probably going to re-sign with Golden State. Kemba Walker again. Charlotte can offer him the max. There's good players out there in the market, but my contention and my issue with all of the speculation that, frankly, the speculation is great for basketball people. It's great for the NBA's bottom line to stay at the top of the headlines day in and day out. But in terms of what is going to actually make teams better and the Celtics better, you need to start looking at the actual composition of a roster and the pieces that will fit with a particular roster to make that franchise better. Kemba Walker, for as gifted a player that he is, his ability to score, his ability to create, his tenacity. I love Kemba Walker. His time at UConn, leading them to the national championship when, they were far from the favorites, him being, a native New Yorker, coming up through the New York City tradition, being from the Bronx. Kemba Walker's a great player, and I think he's going to be very successful next year in Charlotte or wherever he happens to go. I think Charlotte would be the best situation, but there's teams out there that are interested in his services. I just don't think that the Boston Celtics, again, as constituted, would be that team where his abilities would be able to be maximized. I think it'd be much better for him to re-sign with Charlotte, again, just because of the money, but he's established there within that culture, and it's worked before, and it should continue to work. And so again, Kemba Walker, Celtics stealthily, subtly pursuing this free agent. It's great. Stay in the headlines, Danny, and get, this clickbait out there, into the atmosphere, but doesn't make much sense in my view. We need to be the Celtics title town. You build, with blue collar, I've already said that. You've heard me say that. And it's not that Kevin Walker is not that, but he's certainly not a pass-first guard. Okay, he's a scoring guard, and the Celtics need somebody that's going to set up their crucial players. Continuing on with free agency, and again, a lot of speculation. Some of these things are going to come to fruition. A lot of them are not, but something that, was referenced before that's picking up momentum, and I think, has a much greater likelihood of actually taking place is Jimmy Butler going to the Houston Rockets. Reports today is that the Rockets, are interested, in this deal. Jimmy Butler himself, has expressed an interest. The Philadelphia 76ers are in a bit of a difficult predicament in that they have 4 players that they need to concern themselves with keeping or, having in their organization long-term. Of course, that's Ben Simmons, Joel Embiid, who Joel Embiid is definitely under contract. Ben Simmons might be coming up. I believe he's coming up for his contract, of course, represented by Clutch Sports and Mr. Rich Paul. Tobias Harris, who they traded for mid-season. Good player, good teammate, dependable, versatile, and also Jimmy Butler. So Elton Brand has his hands full in terms of, can you bring all 4 of these players back? Is that the best fit for your organization going forward? It's one thing, as we saw this year, to bring players in for 1 year, to see if it can work. The whole one and done phenomenon. that has taken over college basketball and is now just as powerful a force if you look at what happened with the Toronto Raptors winning the championship. But that was last year for the 76ers. And granted, it was a shot that probably will never happen again in NBA history. That sent them packing, and had that shot not happen, the Philadelphia 76ers could quite easily be your current NBA champions because they matched up well with Milwaukee, and with the injuries that Golden State had not being at 100%. So they had their 1 year to take a chance at it. Didn't work out. I don't see why, if I'm Jimmy Butler, and with the East right now being in flux, us not knowing what's going to happen with Kawhi Leonard, the Boston Celtics obviously going through transition, Indiana, their best player coming back from a major injury. So Milwaukee is the only team that looks like they will return as constituted. I believe Chris Middleton will re-sign with them. Nonetheless, you have the best record in the league. You have a 2-0 record in the Eastern Conference Finals. You go ahead and lose 4 straight. You're no, overwhelming, invincible, insurmountable opponent. The Milwaukee Bucks showed that they're climbing the mountain, but in no way, shape, or form on top of the mountain. So if I'm an Eastern Conference team, particularly the Sixers, and a player on the Eastern Conference team like a Jimmy Butler, it's appealing, to take these meetings, to let these storylines gain traction, and all these things do. The NBA is at the forefront of this, is build these individual players' brand, as well as building the brand of the NBA. So that's all good and well. But nonetheless, when it comes time to make grown man decisions, and when people have to think about where they're going to be as the season gets going, and at different points of the season, and then going into the playoffs, money time, the Houston Rockets right now, with the issues that they're having with their best players, the issues that they're having with their salary cap because of the contracts they've signed, and being in the Western Conference, mind you, I think Jimmy Butler, if he wants to win, would take the approach that the Golden State Warriors had in place for a number of years, and take less, to stay with a winning organization. Now, in saying that, we need to make sure it's understood that the culture in Golden State hasn't necessarily been established in other places to the point where players are going to readily accept less. The Golden State Warriors drafted Steph Curry, Klay Thompson, Draymond Green. They traded for and brought Andre Iguodala into a championship situation. They drafted Harrison Barnes, who was there for the first championship. They brought Sean Livingston back from the dust heap of history. Completely revitalized his career. And the fact that the results that came along with those acquisitions, the appreciation that those players had for the Warriors organization and them getting their start in that franchise, that's what laid the groundwork for Kevin Durant to say, I'm going to take less to be a part of, what has been established here. Philadelphia 76ers are not in that place, and frankly, no other franchise in the NBA at present, is in that place. The empire, the dynasty, the invincible team in the NBA is no more. And so everyone now has a legitimate opportunity to not only compete for a championship, but to also to begin to build that type of a culture which they established that allowed them to go to 5 championships straight, and win 3 of those. Jimmy Butler, I think, and this has nothing to do with me having tri-state roots, and being a fan of the 76ers. But personally, I think that's a better situation. If you're willing to grow with a team and make certain sacrifices, there's championships to be won for that 76ers team. If you go to Houston, okay, on paper it looks great. but that's a franchise that, is going in a number of different directions. With the Houston Rockets, I'm gonna segue, if you will. We're bouncing around a little bit. It is what it is, but we have to note that James Harden was up for MVP last night in the NBA awards, and he didn't win the MVP award. For somebody like me, I thought that this was James Harden's year. The fact that it went to Giannis, I have no deep grudge with that. Very deserving. But what James Harden did in the middle of this season, when the Rockets had injuries to tear, that he went on, and then the fact that the Rockets play in the Western Conference, which is also known as the major leagues. So what they're facing night in and night out is a night and day difference in terms of what goes on in the Eastern Conference. This has been the case for close to 2 decades. So the fact that the Rockets slipped to the 4 seed, or it might have been the 5 seed, they'll have to double check that, which meant that they would face off against the Golden State Warriors in the divisional round instead of the conference finals, as frankly should have been the case. There was a last-second buzzer beater involving one Mr. Paul George late in the season that shook up, the entire Western Conference playoff picture. I think the voters, that wasn't recognized to the extent that it should have been. James Harden, he's doing what he's doing in a conference that was and probably will continue to be, even with the regression of the Golden State Warriors, the far superior conference. And I don't agree with or like the fact that James Harden has been up for 3 MVPs, all of which, by the way, have been under Mike D'Antoni's leadership. And people have forgotten that, and we're going to touch on that as well. And he's only won 1. I think that this was a classic case where the young man who has plenty of MVP nominations in his future, Giannis being only 24 years old, could have waited an additional year. I think this race was that close. It should have gone to an individual who lost another MVP that, in retrospect, he could have and maybe should have won 2 years ago to Russell Westbrook, based on the fact that Russell Westbrook averaged a triple-double for the first time in many generations. We'll have to get the exact year. And so we were so stunned that could actually happen in the modern NBA that, it was just automatic that Russell Westbrook had to win that MVP, when in retrospect, and we'll pull up those numbers, James Harden's year that season and Russell Westbrook's numbers, were quite close. Harden didn't necessarily average a triple-double, but he may have been much more efficient than Westbrook was that year, and therefore deserving of that award. With that in mind, again, for me, I would think this was James Harden's year. Happy for Giannis, but it would have been proper. It would have been proper. It was a photo finish. You slighted the man, 2 years ago when it was him and Westbrook. Photo finish. As I said, another photo finish. Okay, tie goes to the veteran. Harden should have got it. Now, what does this have to do with Houston, with this and free agency? The fact of the matter is, the reports that are out there and outnumbering reports to the contrary, that there's serious issues between James Harden and Chris Paul, in my mind, are factual. That's what the circumstance is, and you add to that the fact that there is a lack of respect in Houston for the good work that Mike D'Antoni has done during his tenure there. That is outrageous, preposterous, and absolutely unreasonable. Okay, the narrative that the Houston Rockets collapsed against Golden State in the second round, losing 2 games, when Kevin Durant was out, particularly losing Game 6 on their home floor. I believe that game was in Houston. I'm pretty sure that Game 6 was in Houston. I have to get the exact stats on that. Point of fact is, what people have seemed to have forgotten is that coach before Mike D'Antoni, Kevin McHale, did a nice job with the Rockets. Kevin McHale was a good coach. He's a good commentator. He's been good for basketball, again, since he came into the league in the early 80s, and is one of the elder statesmen of our game, and we need our elder statesmen, and they do a great job for the NBA, and that's going to continue for decades into the future. But when Kevin McHale left Houston, and they decided to move in a different direction, there was rumored to be some friction between McHale and Daryl Morey. Daryl Morey being a very big analytics guy, Kevin McHale, based on his experience, being more of a, interpersonal, look a person in their eye, basing his observations on, the more tangible, versus these advanced statistics. But the point of fact is, when Kevin McHale left the Houston Rockets, he had nothing good to say. He might have had a couple things. He had a lot that wasn't so favorable to say about James Harden. And a lot of other people in the NBA, question James Harden as well. His inability to connect in a positive way consistently with his teammates. The lack of defensive intensity. His disappearing acts that would take place in the playoffs. This was the narrative surrounding James Harden before Mike D'Antoni came into town. And since Mike D'Antoni has been in Houston, all that's happened is James Harden has been nominated for 3 straight MVP awards. And the Houston Rockets, again, were on the verge last year, and this year, right in the mix, competing for an NBA championship. And it's, no more adjectives there, but because, Chris Paul and James Harden are currently at each other's throats, if you want to look at it in that light, which very well might be the case, because the organization decided to commit over $40 million to Chris Paul in the last year of his contract, which prevented the Houston Rockets from re-signing crucial players on their roster, i.e. Trevor Ariza, who, had he been in Houston this year, I can guarantee you that series against Golden State would not have ended in 6 games with Golden State missing Kevin Durant. Those are the structural issues. We knew Chris Paul, as a teammate, kicked up dust when he left the Clippers. Many people recognized that paying Chris Paul $40 million in the last year of his deal was going to hurt. And it's those realities which have currently evidenced themselves, which many people pointed to and could see formulating at some point in time, with this team, that have come back and put them in the position that they are right now. Mike D'Antoni is not responsible for either of those things. And so for Mike D'Antoni, again, Mike D'Antoni was the one that said James Harden is a point guard, not a 2 guard. And what have the results been? MVP nomination after MVP nomination after MVP nomination. End of story. Okay, moving on with free agency. We're a little bit behind today, so we don't have a tremendous amount of studio time, but we're going to make it happen nonetheless. I like these reports about Angelo Russell possibly returning to the Lakers. This would be a great, it's not even to the point about it being quote-unquote redemptive, as, he's already begun to shine and done a very good job with the Nets. But the reason that I really like this possibility is because D'Angelo Russell now playing with LeBron James, and I think those players would vibe. Okay, you come into the league, D'Angelo Russell, young guy in LA, all of the bright lights, you're making all this money. That's a lot for anybody to handle. And the fact that it didn't work out as well as it could, a part of the onus certainly fell on D'Angelo Russell, but at the same time, another part of the onus fell on the fact that the Lakers, at that point in time and up to the present day, we're an organization that did not have the framework in place to mentor, to mold, to build up a talented young player, into the star that they could and would be down the road. So D'Angelo Russell's first stint in LA, a part of the blame certainly falls on his shoulders, but a part of the blame falls on the fact that, the Lakers are an organization that is not first rate. The fact that the Clippers, right across the hall, who are actually looking to build their own building, and get out on their own, establish themselves, in their own right, which I think is outstanding, who have outstanding ownership, which we're going to get to, that term and what the NBA is thinking about doing, and leadership, and coaching. The ownership obviously being Mr. Steve Ballmer, who I might have said before, and I'll say as many times as I need to, the richest owner in team sports on the planet. So that means something, and is willing to deploy those resources in order for his franchise to be successful. And when I say franchises, I was thinking about the late great Paul Allen, owner of the Portland Trail Blazers and the Seattle Seahawks, also a Microsoft man, and the outstanding leadership that he showed, in his capacity as owner for those teams and for that region, in terms of having championship level teams in the Pacific Northwest ad infinitum, going forward, all of this, the fact that the Portland Trail Blazers are a thriving franchise and the, Seattle Seahawks, has a lot to do with Paul Allen saying that, pro sports will be successful, can be and will be successful, in the Northwest, and him putting his money on his innovation, where his mouth is, and that actually turning out. So Steve Ballmer, again, is that type of owner. Jerry West, who he very wisely brought in as a special consultant, to handle the operation of the Clippers. His resume and background, clearly speaks for itself. Many people think he's the best executive in, basketball or team sports. It's debatable, but if you're talking about executives and individuals who build champions through generations, well, Jerry West is in the first sentence in any conversation of sports globally. And Doc Rivers and the outstanding job that he does and has done throughout his career as a coach. So the Clippers are an organization, that can bring in young talent and develop that young talent and maximize that young talent. Where it remains to be seen if that is the case regarding the Lakers, and that's the reason. Overall, I'm excited for Angelo Russell going back to LA, because I think, again, playing with LeBron and Anthony Davis, I think that they are capable of getting through to him, appreciative of his talent and potential, and that would give you a situation where not only would he relieve the responsibilities of LeBron James, who will be entering his 18th season. Anthony Davis, even he's played. He's got a lot of wear on those on the tires. Even though he's in his mid-20s, played a number of seasons. Only doing being a one and done. After winning the national championship at Kentucky. But D'Angelo Russell would make both of their lives much easier. I think that those guys would have a connection, and that would create now if they land D'Angelo, this talk about the Lakers being the favorites for the championship would become a lot more realistic and serious, if those were the pieces that they had in place. Also interesting, for me at least, narrative, and again, going towards the Lakers becoming a championship team, there's reports that they're interested in signing J.R. Smith, obviously a longtime LeBron James teammate, NBA champion, to their roster. And again, filling out this roster now with guys that are going to pull in the right direction, that are going to enjoy each other's company, and that, if they're, in a forward march mode, and again, so, you're a free agent, would you want to take $1 million or $2 million less to play in LA for a championship for the next 2 to 3 years? That is a very attractive proposition that I think will allow the Lakers to build their roster further, into this championship favorite that many people believe they can be. Again, your boy, Cape Cod Kid, running a little bit late. We're gonna have to move through these last couple points. When I get to talking, it is what it is, but we don't have time for the whole show, so we're going to do what we're going to do. These last couple points in conclusion. Masai Ujiri is heading back to the Raptors, which I think was wise. Other teams had seen his success and offered him not only making him the highest paid executive, but also offering him ownership within their franchise. That would be the Washington Wizards, but Ujiri decided to stay in Toronto. It still remains to be seen what Kawhi Leonard is going to do, even though reports say that he is seriously considering remaining in Toronto, even though I believe that he will eventually sign with the LA Clippers for many of the reasons that I've previously stated. But those are two, Ujiri staying, means stability, but if Kawhi were to stay, that would make the forecast in the Eastern Conference for next year decidedly different. NBA awards. Last night, I told you how I feel about the MVP. Happy for Giannis, but feel that this was James Harden's year. I love the international tone of this NBA awards. The fact that we have Giannis as the league MVP, the fact that we have Luka as the Rookie of the Year, the fact that we have Rudy Gobert as the Defensive Player of the Year, and the fact that we have Spicy P, Mr. Siakam, Pascal as the NBA's Most Improved Player. The fact that this game is not just it is global. Okay, not in word, but in deed, in reality, and that is wonderful for all of us who support basketball and have been lifelong fans and participants. That's great. And hey, not only does it mean that the United States does not have the gold medal secured, when the Olympics come up, but this idea, you want to get into the NBA, and you got to compete. You're competing not just against 350 million people here in the United States of America, but more and more, it's that 9+ billion people globally, and whatever percentage of that plays basketball. That's your competition pool, to get into this particular organization, and all it does is just raise the quality and the level of basketball that we get a chance to see. Again, folks, shorter episode, but we're happy to be with you. Let me see, did I miss anything? Mavs are talking about maxing out Mr. Porzingis. I think it's a good move. We're looking forward to, again, as the aforementioned Luka Doncic and Mr. Porzingis. Hopefully he's coming back healthy. We got to make sure he gets the rest, but that will be an outstanding franchise. Folks, that's going to do it. Go ahead and comment, like, and subscribe as you feel the need. I am your host, the Cape Cod Kid, artist formerly known as Andre King. I want to thank you for tuning in to SandCity Sports, and we will see you here again the next time.
Piece of souls do sedate ourselves. Just a number of this pain we feel. Yes, at times we do hate ourselves, but each day we try to retake ourselves. So yes, a piece of souls do sedate ourselves. Just a number of this pain we feel. Yes, at times we do hate ourselves, but each day we try to embrace ourselves. Yeah.